Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Hello and welcome to this week's Open Dialogue. As you are aware, last week on Wednesday, late Wednesday evening, the 26th of October, the shrine of the Syed Ahmad, who is the son of the seventh holy Imam of the Ahlebait, was targeted of a heinous terrorist attack, where women and children and unarmed civilians were shot at and targeted in a shooting attack. This attack left dozens injured and dozens more killed and martyred. Our condolences extend to the family of the affected and to the families of all the martyrs. Today we are going to discuss the topic of anger, extremists, and terrorism. What drives people to commit such heinous crimes against civilians, unarmed civilians? And what drives people to kill mercilessly in this manner? We will also discuss the topic of anger. What are the causes of anger? How can it be dealt with? And what are the strategies that we can employ to deal with anger issues? Is anger something needed or something that we should completely rule out and it has no use in our lives? To discuss this topic in detail, we are joined by our revered sister, Sister Fahima Mohammad. Sister Fahima Mohammad is a certified in psychology or science of mental health. She's currently studying her master's degree at King's College London in the same subject. She's also a presenter, broadcaster, and commentator on various media channels. And she is not new to this channel. So hello and welcome and assalamu alaikum, Sister Fahima.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. We are also joined by Hujjatul Islam Muslimin, Syed Mohammad Razavi. Syed Mohammad Razavi has been a teacher. He is a speaker and a lecturer at various centers. And he also attends and represents the Ahlul Bayt School of Thought at various universities around the world. Syed Mohammad Razavi currently is the head of the Religious Advisory Board at the Shia Islamic Education Society in London. Assalamu alaikum, Syed.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So today's discussion, I will start with you with the first question. If you can tell us, Syed, who was behind this attack that happened last week at the shrine of Syed Ahmad, son of Musa, and what was the driving factor? Who claimed responsibility for this attack? And what are the latest developments regarding this?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, I mean, it was obviously, it was immediately claimed that it was Daesh and ISIS behind it. And when we say Daesh or ISIS, the mind goes immediately behind, or the mind goes towards the creators of Daesh and ISIS, who create Daesh and ISIS. And we have had many programs, and it has become very clear to everyone in the world that although the creation of Daesh and ISIS was blamed to the Muslims, but initially the creators were the so-called enemies of Islam who wanted to undermine the image of Islam by doing false flag operations. And I would say that creation of Daesh and ISIS was one of the false flag operations to achieve their own targets.
Okay, Sister Fahima, what drives individuals to such kind of attacks?
Assalamu alaikum again. Thank you so much again for having me. And yes, these sort of behaviors, a lot of the times when we think about anger, aggression, and things like that, we think that it's genetic, but a lot of scientists do believe that it is a learned behavior. And what drives that is an ideology. It's also usually when it starts from young age, it's the caregiver. But a lot of people that are actually being involved in this are usually not from stable backgrounds or families. And they are obviously looking to be influenced by somebody and looking for a motive, looking for some sort of way of belief and a system. So these individuals are identified in that way, and then they are easily manipulated. They are easily taken into a direction which they are obviously lacking. So we have to understand that people that actually are coming into this kind of extremist behavior usually are the ones that are lacking and are in need, and also they do sort of look for a role model in order to drive them in a particular direction and way. So we've seen even programs, whether it's in the US, as to how people are even basically taken for becoming soldiers or even in the army. They do have some sort of like background. They do come from certain families, and they do have some sort of ideology in order to sort of carry forward in that way. And it's the same when it comes to extremism and terrorism as well.
That's very interesting what you said. Before I pose the next question to the Syed, I'd like to remind the viewers that they can get in touch with the Open Dialogue team on our email address that's on the screen, opendialogue@hotmail.com. And also, any views expressed in this program are of the speakers and do not reflect views of the channel. Syed, based on what Sister Fahima just said, that usually extremists look for role models and they need a direction. Please tell us about state-sponsored terrorism and how does that direct such individuals?
Well, when we say state-sponsored terrorism, it's usually aimed to achieve their own political aims. So therefore, they deliberately go and choose the people to create trouble in their own society or other societies or other countries to achieve their own targets. So that is where we need to be worried, and we need to be aware. And the awareness should be created by, I would say, the religious scholars and those who are responsible for the training of the society and education, that they create this kind of awareness. Because without awareness, people can easily be manipulated. And many of those countries where such incidents have taken place, and later on the people who were arrested who created trouble, when you interview them, they clearly say that we didn't know, we were just encouraged or manipulated or tempted by promises or gifts, other things, to this kind of trouble. And now we are realizing and we are regretting, and this is exactly what's happening after recent incidents that took place in Iran as well. All those who have been arrested, and regretting joining hands in the hands of those who literally want to destroy and divide and rule over them.
So following from what you have just said, Syed, Sister Fahima, what is it about the makeup of individuals that make them perfect recruits? I think there is something in their personality that's being manipulated by those who recruit them and who give direction to such individuals, because anger and aggression is something that affects people's brains, people's neurology, and what is the makeup of these individuals that they become easy praise to be recruited in such actions?
There's three different ways of describing and understanding extremism and radicalization. There's domestic extremism, there's violent extremism, and there's radicalization. And you should also understand that extremism in terms of terrorism, racism, and sort of like inter-religious hatred is usually very political, either very far right or far left, very fundamentalist, and it actually is an activity which is not moral, and it's an ideology or politically in accordance and written with this, which is not necessarily legal, right? So at the end of the day, there has to be some sort of narrative and a story that has to be presented in order for that individual to feel something, because anger and aggression is like a threat. It's usually something where people feel that there's injustice, unfairness. So when you have a story and a narrative to drive that person, and then it creates a belief system, then that individual will be radicalized. And then also they can be extreme in their behavior for many reasons. And they can be easily driven to doing things which is immoral, which is even to an extent where it doesn't even make sense to a normal human mind. But these sort of individuals, yes, a lot of the times when we are angry and we are aggressive, then, the physiology of yourself does change and your brain does change. There is stress cortisol, there's adrenaline that is released, the neurotransmitters and the chemicals that are released in your body. So when you're constantly being fed with stories, whether it's in media, whether if you're going to certain centers and you are and you are part of a group and you're constantly hearing the same things again and again, then your body will react, your mind will change, and then your behavior will follow. So it is something that it is training. It is training from a thought, and then it's a belief, and then it starts also to, you drive that person to do whatever it is that you say, because you built that trust. And that belief is so embedded within your psychology that you will just do anything that you need in order to basically follow suit with whoever you're listening to. And it fits the narrative of the story as well. So it's very important how we surround ourselves with people and how we listen, and also how we also separate ourselves from just not one particular group, so that we can actually get a much wider perspective and open ourselves. But a lot of the times, these people are quite isolated. They are very sad, and anger comes from also triggers with mental health, especially with young children. A lot of studies have shown that, and feeling like as if, you are sad, you are inadequate. So there is some sort of like a personality within that person that would be a little bit more extreme than the norm, because of these sort of like, things that I just stated.
Sure. So Syed, based on what Sister Fahima just described, why is then do we see that extremism and terrorism have become words synonymous to Muslims? Whereas recently, in the past month, we have seen riots in Leicester that involved the individuals from the Hindutva background. And yet we see that the narrative and the picture that's painted on mainstream media exclusively associates extremism and terrorism to people with the Muslim background. Why is that?
Well, I mean, the aim is to undermine religion. I would look at the terminology extremism very carefully. For example, if they mean by being extremists that I'm a practicing Muslim, I'm proud to be practicing Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, and they are deliberately doing that to put off, especially put the youth off from religion, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, or any other religion. They just want people to be secular and anti-religion and faith and use this to manipulate them against their own religion, so they can control them in their hands and direct them as they want for their own personal gains and benefits. So I would be proud to call myself extremist if it means I'm a practicing Muslim. Of course, as a practicing Muslim, I would understand my responsibility and duty in different societies. What is my behavior is supposed to be in an environment where I'm living as a minority, and what is my duty and responsibility if I'm living in a Muslim country and Muslim environment, what are my obligations, and I would be proud to practice them. So we have to be very careful that we should not fall for this extremist label that is being given to anyone who disagrees with them in any form. So, uh, mm, and unfortunately, I have had Christian pastors and fathers and priests who have complained the same, that this secularism, or those people who want to control the politics of the world, are undermining Christianity in churches. People are going less to the churches, and the Christian leaders complain about that as well. So we have to be very careful how to describe extremism and extremists.
Of course, you are talking about us being careful, but the reality of the matter, Sister Fahima, is that the wider media does present the picture of Muslims to be the extremists and terrorists, and that is the narrative that they push forward. So even if there are gun attacks or shootings done by other faiths, they are never called terrorists. It would just be called a shooting, or some watered down words are used. What is your opinion about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's various platforms now, even outside the mainstream. When you look at either Twitter or YouTube and various satellite channels, which are streaming different voices, and people are aware. They're not just watching the mainstream media, and they are being called out. And I think it's not just about even stating that, we are obviously more towards a secular society. The fact that, most developed countries do actually say in their policies and in their value system that they do actually have sort of like equality when it comes to religion. So we can call them out. It's just that we don't have the voices as well enough as loud, and we are not on the mainstream channels as well to be able to say that. But it has been said many times that at the end of the day, we are just only abiding by what your rules are, to say that we are also part of the system, and we can be, and it's not being called anything sort of extreme. It's just also being part of what it is. Just like how if, a group needs to be recognized, we want to also be part of that group to be recognized. So that's exactly what we're trying to say and do here. So we're trying to, make them abide by what they state. So, and I think that, yes, the voices on the mainstream is definitely one-sided to a certain extent in some cases, depending on which country they are not favored with and they're not alliance with. So then they will shout and scream about, the mistreatment of certain individuals, whereas in other countries they will alliance with and they have even worse problems and nothing will be raised about that. And everyday people do see this and they are being called out about it. But unfortunately, the big players will constantly do what they need to do because, again, there's a huge funding. There's huge groups that are actually there because they're in every place that we have. There are groups which are being funded by outsiders, and those are the ones that are going to be, put on these platforms and given those sort of like media attention, right? And so that's why you find that people will never speak on certain, countries for a certain individual being shot or, being mistreated in one way. And you find in other countries, there's hundreds that are happening, but it will never be spoken about. So it's very obvious to a lot of us, if we understand politics, even in the basic terms, and I'm no politician here or an analyst, but I can even see it myself if you just do some research. So there is going to be a constant, there's going to be a constant struggle because Islam is one of those religions that does not conform. We have strict in our rules, which do not change. We don't water it down. We don't change our scriptures. We don't change for anything in society, even though it's been, over time where other religions even have relaxed, whether it's in their churches or synagogues or wherever it is. We are very firm in our belief. And I think in a way that is actually a strength and a threat to many others, because at the end of the day, I feel that, especially even as Muslim women, wearing the hijab is an identity, and we're showing who we are and what we represent, for example. And that alone is another strength. And it's another thing which is, it's a constant fight. So we need to look beyond what is happening. And I think instead of it making it as an attack, I think at the end of the day, it shows how not vulnerable we are, but how strong we are, that's why we are being targeted to a certain extent, because we are strong and we are maintaining what has been there for many, many generations, from the time of the Quran being written, from the time of the practices that has been there, has not been changed. And regardless of sect or anything, the foundations remain. And I think that for most people is a threat. But I think we need to speak a lot more louder and have a lot more voices, like platforms like this. But we still have to be careful, as we are obviously being watched and we are being monitored, and we have to abide by the law of the land, which is in our faith. So we're not extreme, and we are just only doing what we need to do because the land itself and the law itself allows it, which we are part of it. So that's how I see it. And I think we need to just have different terminology, different ways of thinking, and remind them of the rules that they are setting, and we're just going to be part of it.
So that's a very important point that you raised there. Syed, following on from this, it's important to believe in something, and it's important to stand up for what you believe in. So has anger got a place in our daily lives, in our personal lives, or is it something that is shunned by religion and we should try and... how does religion actually direct this emotion of anger?
For that, we need to look at the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Rahman and Rahim, and also Jabbar and Qahar as well. So we, as the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, also represent what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has as his attributes. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us to be kind and merciful and generous, and even Prophet Muhammad is being advised that, O Prophet, if you were harsh on people, they would have not gathered around you. But at the same time, when dealing with those who are corrupt, who are mufsid fil arz, who are muharib, who are confronting the society and damaging the interests of the society and the creations of God, and damaging environment, damaging, hurting people or animals or anyone, those are considered as muharib, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used his qahariyat, I mean aggressive nature, to deal with the wrongdoers. So he teaches us that to be firm and kind and generous and helpful to everyone, but at the same time, if you are dealing with the wrongdoers, you should not be lenient towards them, and you should deal with them the way they should be dealt with. Otherwise, they will grow like a cancer in the society, and the cure for cancer is elimination of the cancer.
So it is an emotion then that's been gifted to the human beings by God, and it has its use. Without anger, the society cannot perform properly, because we would not pursue justice and we would not stand up against oppression. But Sister Fahima, at what stage do we as human beings start experiencing anger emotions? Is it as children, or as in our adolescence years, or later on in life? Or are we born with this emotion?
Like I said at the beginning, a lot of people think it's genetic and anger and aggression, but actually it's a learned behavior. And it actually comes from psychology that anger is not necessarily a reaction, or it's normally a reaction, and a distraction from inner suffering. It's from sadness, it's from loneliness, it's from shame, anxiety, inadequacy, and isolation. A lot of children that may express anger can be associated with ADHD, anxiety, Tourette syndrome, OCD. So we have to be very careful when children are very aggressive and they cannot, listen for very long periods of time. And it is related to a mental health disorder. There are also 3 types of anger, just generally within humans, which is passive aggression, open aggression, and assertive anger. So we need to understand what type of anger we are actually showing. And a lot of animal studies, whether it's rodents or primates, they do have a different way, which a lot of scientists have actually, studied to show why do animals have anger in their environment. And it is to do with the environment, whether it's a threat, whether it's protection. So a lot of that is, shown even in the animal kingdom and in the world, that your environment plays a huge role as to how you behave. And the fact that with humans, we know that when we are basically having this anger within us, it's a physiological reaction where you're releasing this cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and it can also lead to PTSD. It's associated with that, which is increased stress, and it's a threat to a response system if it's extreme exposure and a real reaction which is constant. So I guess it's not just about talking about anger as in just a momentarily sort of event. It has to be something where if it's continuous, if it's uncontrollable, and if it's increasing, then it's a danger to the human mind and body. Again, we have the hypothalamus and the amygdala, which is another part of the brain, which is actually associated with anger. And these sort of things are highlighted in the fMRI scans. And it actually shows the exposure of extreme threat. So we need to obviously understand how to regulate ourselves. And even if anger is there to sometimes protect us, just like if you have a fear and we need to freeze, we need to run away, flight, it's all these normal, natural responses in a normal human, just like how you have to press those brakes when you're in a car. We need to have those reactions, all right, because it saves us. But again, if it's extreme and if it's bad for you, it tenses up your muscles, and it can even cause a heart attack if it's really, really severe in really extreme circumstances. So we need to be very, very careful when it comes to anger being a learned behavior, which is continuous. And even though it's a natural emotion, which we cannot control, but what we can control and learn is how we respond to it. And we should learn from a young age. And parents do need the skill for that in order to help their children and develop it. And if you do need help with that, you need to seek some outside advice. And there's a lot of, tips and strategies to help yourself, because again, it comes from a belief. It comes from a lot of, could be a trigger for mental health illnesses, as well as, you feeling anxiety or depression or some sort of like Tourette syndrome or OCD as well.
Syed, carrying on from what Sister Fahima just said, that anger is a learned behavior. You, of course, deal with cases of family breakdowns and family issues on a daily, in your daily life. Family is the nucleus of a society, and if anger is a learned behavior and negative use of anger and negative use of aggression actually takes birth in the family, how can parents actually help their children, and how can they help themselves in order to learn how to deal with these issues? And also, what kind of effects do you see that these learned behaviors that are passed on from parents onto children actually have in terms of the adhesion of society and the adhesion of the families? We can't hear you. Say it. and
Well,
take
I'll
to Islam?
continue until he comes back. Also, just to also make you aware that a lot of us don't realize that children are still developing in their brain. The prefrontal cortex, this part of the brain, is only developed when you're around about, fully developed when you're around about 22 years old. So it just goes to show how much parents, they give a lot of responsibility, and even schools, the institutes, madrasas, they put a lot of responsibility on youngsters, and which is absolutely fine, but it just shows how much support that they do need, because the prefrontal cortex of your brain is when you're making decisions, is when you actually are regulating yourself. So we need to understand that, we are growing up right up to the point we are not fully developed. And even though we can have the experience of it and we can have the perfect surroundings, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we have more support for our youngsters. Just don't think that because they're teenagers and they are young adults, that they can be going out into the world and they should know. I think a lot of parents make that mistake, and it puts a lot of stress and pressure on the youngsters. And then that's when, they can actually make the wrong decision, when they actually need more guidance when they are growing up. Don't just love them, care for them, and nurture them when they are at that really young sort of child age. You actually have to also build that connection and bond when they are from adolescent to young, sort of like teenagers, as well as young men and women that are coming into society. So regardless of a broken family, you still can have two parents who are giving that attention, who understand the need and the development of that child, because the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, and they do still need assistance in making decisions and also guidance with making choices.
Definitely. But Syed, how does having aggression and anger already part of one's family as a growing young child or as a growing young adult, what kind of effect does that have on such individuals who already experience aggression from an adult in their own homes and families? Syed, can you hear us?
Definitely, behavior has an effect, and I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was saying that any kind of good or wrong behavior has an effect on the members of the family. So if the aggression is going on in the family, the child is going to be nurtured in that environment, and may use that kind of behavior in his school, in his educational environment, in his working environment. And if he reaches to a high position later on in his life, he will continue to use that aggressive or polite nature of him in that environment. So it is important that these are identified in very early stages and dealt with and treated with, and the psychologists who are experts in this field can help to develop the society in a positive way. I mean, it keeps cutting off.
That's okay. So following on from your point that you just made, that we need to reach out for help and help these young children and young growing adults, youngsters, in order to have proper strategy to deal with anger before they go out in society, because of obviously extreme anger and aggression lead to abuse and breakdown of families and a lot of society issues. So, Sister Fahima, as a psychologist and as a trained person in this area, what are the practical steps that families who suffer from anger and aggression issues can use in order to um, control these emotions and deal with them appropriately?
I know there's a lot of sort of stigma around seeking help outside, your family members, especially talking to a professional. And a lot of people don't want to see themselves labeled, but it's highly recommended. And especially when you're living in the countries that we are, where it's very available and it actually is also freely available. It is such a shame that we do not take that. But even if you feel that you don't want to take those steps initially, we need to have a balanced life. Your nutrition plays a huge part in your body, right? It actually also releases a lot of chemicals where there is food for mood. So you can actually have foods that can increase in your, memory, in your sort of like, in your, helping with your depression, helping with your sadness, giving you that extra boost in your step. There's also having, outdoors activity. A lot of us stay indoors a lot. We're in front of the computer, whether it's at work, and then we come home and then we don't actually see daylight. And it doesn't matter even if there's no sun, but just knowing that the light from even the clouds, it's a bright light, which actually even helps with your vitamin D. And it actually also gives you that sense of being happy when you're just outside in nature. Exercise, food, breathing techniques, understanding meditation and mindfulness is extremely important. And yes, we know that we can do that even in our salah, even in our dhikr and things like that. But at the same time, even if you're just thinking and manifesting good things, because our nervous system doesn't know what is real and what is not real. So if we're going to constantly think about what is sad, we're going to actually develop that in our everyday life. And if we are trying to not just take away the negative, but think, okay, that's negative, but how can I overcome it? How is that challenge can be overcome? Because a lot of us, again, we don't understand the way in which we think. There's a lot of cognitive distortions, it's called, where we polarize, think, we generalize, we distort, and we delete information. In psychology, we know this about humans. So that, again, gives us a story which is not necessarily fact or real. It is just perspective. So when you talk to a psychologist, especially because I'm trained in CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy as well, and you understand the way in which you think, your perception of the self, the world, and of others. So your map of the world, your view of the world, all of that plays part. So then you become less frustrated. You become easier to manage some of the things that trigger you to actually be angry and aggressive and things like that. And you'll have better sort of reactions and responses. And it's not that your aggression creates the family. It's your actual family that is not composed in that way, which creates the aggression. If you come from a family that does not know how to speak well, who does not know how to deal with your emotions, even as a child, does not meet your needs, does not even listen to you, does not respect you, because it works both ways, as we know. But again, if a child needs to know respect, they have to see it in the actual role model and the caregiver, right? So all of these things are so important that parents need to build in their homes first in order for that child to go out in society. They think the influence is outside, when actually is in their home. So you need to make sure that you understand this first in order to build the next generation by being that society that you complain about and better yourself.
Definitely, that's very well said, actually. Syed, what can children who are stuck in families with such issues do and they feel cornered? Because if the family itself is not aware in how to deal with these issues, how can that youngster and that child respond to the? I mean, I know in schools nowadays they do teach mindfulness, but again, when you go back home and you're confronted with these negative behaviors, what effect does that have on these children, and what can they do about it?
Well, while they are growing up as children, I mean, it would need a miracle to get them out of that situation. I mean, if happens, then of course the outsiders can help and assist them. And as Allah Ta'ala in Holy Quran says that Allah does not help unless you ask for the help, unless you want the change in yourself. So only positive thing that we can look for is to hope and pray that they get connected to the right people, later on in their lives they are able to make their own decisions, and when they take the first step, the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are there to guide them. So the initial step has to be taken by the individual, and what can lead into that situation is the responsibility of society and those who run the society. How caring are they of the members of the society? How, if we all, like members of the society, took care of each other and helped each other and visited each other and were aware of each other's problems, we would have less of these problems. But unfortunately, the social media does exist, and we speak to people thousands of miles away, and we are apart from the people who are living right next to us, next door to us, and we are not aware of their problems. So we need to remodel our society in a direction we become caring members of the society, and we look after each other, we look after neighbors and everyone, so we are aware of each other's problem, and then we can help them positively.
Of course, the games nowadays that children spend most of their time on, that have a lot of violence in them, doesn't help either. But Sister Fahima, when people who are serious about changing these behaviors in themselves and in their family members do follow the steps that you mentioned of exercise, of looking at nutrition, of being mindful and reaching out for cognitive behavior therapy, or even understanding your own behaviors and acting accordingly, and trying to correct those behaviors and being aware of yourself. But sometimes there is a relapse, and sometimes doesn't matter how much you do, you will fall behind. What can those individuals do, and how should they be thinking when there is a relapse and they have made a mistake? How can they pick themselves up again and carry on with their journey?
First, we have to accept that we are human and we're all going to basically break and fall at any time, even if we're not on a journey of, getting well. So relapse will happen most definitely, even for people that have addiction or extreme sort of illnesses, whether it's even with people that are overcoming self-harm or they, overcoming some sort of addiction. And it has been shown that it takes, just a start of 21 days for you to start changing a habit, but it can increase or you can do it within a second. It all depends on your mind and also how your body reacts and responds depending on what that change is. So there is a science behind it too, but the relapse is only there to sometimes maybe show you that, okay, you're human. But what we do is we look at that relapse as you falling even further down into that spiral, instead of saying, okay, for example, something small, I've been dieting all week and I had, a whole pack of biscuits. So what am I going to do? Am I going to give up? No, I'll start the following day and start again. So you just start again at the end of the day, right? Even from that relapse. I know in certain circumstances, especially when it's addiction and drug abuse, it can be a lot more detrimental, but that's when you need the assistance, that's when you need the support, and that's when you need the help. But again, we need to not be so hard on ourselves. And children are very resilient, regardless of what they come from. They even can be, really amazing families that can raise 3-4 different children, and they'll all be raised differently because they are raising children at different stages in their own lives. So when people say that, oh, how come that happens? It's because that parent is different at a different stage and they're meeting that child at a different stage and they're giving a different experience to that child and they're responding differently. So when you understand psychology, human behavior and learning, it's not even about that. And even if you have the perfect family, you can have the most religious background, that child might be veered elsewhere. So it's all about, social media. Yes, we complain about it a lot, but it's how you use it. There's a lot of more, lecturers out there. There's a lot more availability of speakers out there that, comes to your home literally by just looking at a screen. So it depends how you choose. And if those individuals are suffering, it's all open for you. It's just that, hopefully if you are hoping to get well and get better, you click on the right button and that keeps coming. The algorithms keep, redoing and re-showing the same things over and over again when you click on it. So again, I always look at things in that light, and I always see there's hope. And I've seen people, the most successful ones, have come from tragedy, have come from, challenge, have overcome the worst things in life. And that's just not just from our religion, from science, from psychology, from philosophers. So at the end of the day, if we say that more, it will give more hope. And again, we are human. We are supposed to fall. We are going to be constantly tested. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that constantly. So to even accept this and pretend that this is going to be a perfect life when you're trying to get well is unrealistic. We need to fall in order to get up. We need to have those moments in order to appreciate it. So when you understand that behavior, there's no such thing as you thinking that, a fall is a break. It just means you stumble, but then you get up stronger. And that's it. It's very simple.
Thank you for that explanation. That was beautifully said. And of course, I'd like to remind the viewers that if anybody would like to contact Sister Fahima, you can find out more about her, and you can contact her on her website, Coach FM, that's her initials, coachfm.com. We are fast reaching the end of the program now. Syed, I would like you to make a final concluding remark regarding the importance of overcoming anger issues and aggression issues, and how one thing can escalate to another, and anger can lead to extremism and can lead to potential terrorism if it's not regulated and it's not brought in line, and it can lead to radicalization, like Sister Fahima said. So what are your concluding remarks about this topic? Can the Syed hear us? Sister Fahima, if you go ahead and answer this, and inshallah the Syed will be back. We seem to have internet issues with.
Oh, he's
okay,
back.
we've got him. Syed, did you hear the question?
No, not at all. I was totally frozen.
So I asked you for your concluding remark. We're reaching the end of the program regarding tonight's discussion and how important it is to hone in anger, because it can be a domino effect and lead to a lot of other things that are unneeded in life.
It all depends on our clicks, where we click. If we click to Allah, even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is waiting for our click. If you click on the right, in the right direction, you will get the benefit and help. And
so connection to God. Your voice is cutting off, but I think we understood the gist of what you are saying is that connection to God is key. You can continue. You're back on the screen now.
Frozen again, I think.
Sister Fahima, what are your concluding remarks regarding tonight's discussion?
I think don't underestimate the power of what is within. And as we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that no condition will change unless you change within yourself first. So we need to basically understand that, the universe is within us. We do have the power. We do need to seek help. We do need to also reach out for assistance. We cannot do things where we have to just, be by ourselves. And if we cannot regulate and be in control and manage ourselves, then you might think, okay, I'm young and my parents are putting up with it. But what about when you go to school? What about when you go into work? What about you go into society? You're not going to actually fulfill your dreams, your goals, and your successions. So you need to take it very seriously, and parents need to take it very seriously, and not just, brush over and, put things under the carpet. You need to go to the core of it. So you do need to seek professional help. And I do advise that if it is something which is continuous and is causing problems, especially amongst schooling or, the family, where it upsets everybody else, don't take it lightly. It should not be normal. You get what you tolerate, and we shouldn't be tolerating in life. We should be having peace. We should be having tranquility, and our home should be our sanctuary majority of the time. And if you cannot do it, you work on it. And I promise you, it can be done. So with salah, with prayer, and in our religion, it says you take the advantages of technology, society, as well as, what is out there. We are learning about psychology. We are knowing what's happening. The tools, the strategies are all there. So use it. Don't, just forget about it and think that there's no way out in this. And if you fall, again, get up. A child walks not just once, he walks from falling 10 times, if not 100 times over so many months. So why shouldn't we do that as we're growing up as well?
Definitely deal with the matters before they escalate and they become out of control, and reach out and use all the help that's available. Syed, you'll have the last say since you're having internet connections today, but inshallah you're back on, so you can have the last say. No, I don't think there is joy there, but thank you so much to Syed. Would you like to say your final remarks before we end the program?
I think I don't see anyone in my side of that.
I think your voice is fine and it's reaching us now. You were saying something when you got cut off. Okay, but thank you so much tonight. Thank you so much, Sister Fahima, for coming on today and joining us and discussing this topic and sharing your knowledge with us. And I'd like to remind the viewers that they can reach Sister Fahima on her website, coachfm.com. Thank you so much for Syed Mohammad Razavi. Thank you, dear viewers. And please do contact us on our email, opendialogue@hotmail.com, for your suggestions and any comments regarding the topics that we have discussed.